Flo and the Mo.
Hello, everybody. Today's guest is Wyatt Claypool. He is the co-founder of a successful online news outlet called the National Telegraph, which deals with current politics. And aside from publishing articles and online videos, he is also running on behalf of the Conservative Party in Alberta, specifically the nomination for Calgary Signal Hill. And I would like to thank you for joining me and spending time to chat about the current state of affairs. I know you're a very busy guy promoting and canvassing and knocking on doors, so appreciate you being here.
No, with no worries at all. It's actually fun to be on. I actually clear my Sundays to have a nothing day in the middle of the week. And it's good that you said it's a successful publication, because independent media success, compared to other media in other countries in Canada is like minuscule. I mean, it's like you can actually make $5 as successful in independent media in Canada.
It's the grapple hold that the mainstream media has had on us for a while is obviously dwindling a lot, and independent media and journalists are just exposing and telling the real stories of what's going on. And so I appreciate that. And one of the reasons why I started up a YouTube program is because the good old Canadian government is trying to crack down on internet censorship. So while we still have a chance to really express the truth, let's go for it. So
I only ever reluctantly started a YouTube channel because, again, I used to do only writing for the longest time, and then me and Daniel Boardman would do some weekly or bi-weekly live streams on Facebook and YouTube, but we'd have like 500 subscribers. It was nothing. And there was some people who would watch us just from reading our articles, but people didn't even really know who we were, because when you read an article, you don't really like dig into who the author is. You more so just read the content. But I can't even access the 73,000 follower page I have on Facebook anymore. And so the whole YouTube thing was more of just me being forced to record stuff on camera. I was the most nervous person ever, just recording videos in my house by myself, no one else in the house. I would get so nervous recording stuff. I'm like nauseous. And it's gotten to the point where, honestly, Justin Trudeau has helped me out a lot by forcing me into exposure therapy.
Sure. I mean, I'm still kind of new to this game as well, so I know what you mean there. Turning on the camera and staring at that and trying to talk as if you're talking to someone is something. But in terms of Canada, I mean, 8 years of Trudeau, by every economic metric, I don't think there's one positive takeaway. And as bad as that is, I guess the positive is it's allowed a lot of people to really wake up to what's been going on at the cost of, at the fiscal cost of everything that's in our wallets and savings. I recently opened up a Twitter account, and I came across you, and you posted a video specifically about Maxime Bernier and the PPC, and he talks a big game and he says all the right things, but how genuine is he in wanting to run? And I think you laid out it very well about his lack of strategic funding in certain areas. I don't know if you would like to just explain a bit more on that video, but
and the approach I took in that video, and for background, in 2020, especially after Aaron O'Toole was the Conservative Party leader, I was trying to advise the PPC on the side. I basically have never taken money doing anything political I've ever done in my life. So sometimes people think you're an illegitimate advisor because you're not literally an employee, but really that just means I do it out of the kindness of my own heart, or at least the ego of my own heart, wanting to give people advice. But I was trying to help them say what better strategies they could do to get their message out. How do you appeal to more kind of middle class voters who get very uncomfortable when politics gets intense? And it was everything to seem to just go in one ear out the other, and I suspected that they actually never really wanted to hear any advice from someone outside their small circle. And so it's not like I was now mad at them and I'm on the warpath. I just stopped caring. And since Pierre Poilievre ended up becoming the Conservative Party leader, more so than ever, you couldn't really make a case for why you should be investing money into this party, because you could say, well, they're still better on certain aspects of policy. And I'll even agree to that. Probably on certain policy areas, I'd probably agree with them more than whatever the Conservatives have. But the whole point, that's not how politics works. You don't vote for a party because of the purity of the platform, and we'd all end up starting our own party. I'd start the Wyatt Claypool party, in which surprisingly I agree with 100% of what it comes out with. But so with the video on Bernier, I'm not doing this thing where people are like, oh, they're secretly working for the Liberals, or that Maxime Bernier is, secretly impure in his policy, and actually everything the Conservatives say is good and everything he says is wrong, or they're racist or something like that. That's a very weak argument. It's an emotional argument in order to say that I don't want to have to deal with this group because I can just define them as bad somehow, just generically bad. I did from the perspective where, regardless if they are genuinely trying to win or not, I suspect in a certain sense Bernier isn't trying to win. It doesn't matter. I can show you on paper that these people are not doing the right things. If you believe in the platform, they're stealing your money effectively by not using it where it counts, because Canada is a first past the post system. You can't wish it to be PR. It doesn't matter how much you want you want chicken.
I think a certain someone ran a platform on the fact that that'll be the last time it is first past the post too.
Yeah, we're all supposed to forget about that. I've already forgiven him. Of course I have, because he's an amazing prime minister, that Justin Trudeau guy. But but the PBC can't just wish the system was PR. It doesn't matter how much you run up the popular vote score in certain parts of the country. You got to prove the formula works. Elizabeth May in Saanich in the Gulf Islands proved the Green Party formula could work in one riding, and they've been able to expand out from that, despite the Green Party being a crazy, borderline communist, anti-Semitic party. It's a nuts party when you actually dig into what they believe. It's like all about healing crystals and hating Jewish people at the end of the day. It's very strange. But they found a constituency where that could work. Not that those people believe in those things, but at least the surface level pitch of the Green Party could work. Saanich in the Gulf Islands is a alliance riding. It was a reform riding in 93. It was an alliance riding after that. It was conservative up until Elizabeth May won it, because she figured out what people wanted in that area, and she was able to appeal to that. She's not even from the riding. She's a carpetbagger in that area, but she still ran. You can never take away from her, and even like politicians like Justin Trudeau, good campaigners. Very good campaigners. Bernier only lost Beauce in 2019 by 10%. That's not that much considering the way swings work, and his main opponent was the Conservative. If he took 5% away from the Conservative, they would have been tied. And I think he could have easily done that if he showed up for one day.
Yeah. No, I agree. And when the PPC first became a party, I know, it was back when the Conservatives, Kevin O'Leary was running. He dipped out, threw his hat in for Bernier, then lost to Scheer, whether that was a funny business went on there or not. When he first started his own party, I did support him, but it was, again, hard to make the argument to continue the support when from then until now, there's been no growth in the party. Sure, everyone knows Max, but there's been no growth in the party outside of that. And we did have to go through Scheer. I'm not as informed as I would like to be in that, but I don't think he truly represented Conservatives enough to want change. And then O'Toole, I thought from the get-go, was clearly not a Conservative at all.
He ran as a massive red Tory in 2017. He was like considered the red Tory in 2017, and then you just say that I'm True Blue in 2020, and there's enough people willing to get behind you because they think you're a stronger vehicle than like Peter MacKay. That's always the funny thing, is that I always find the endorsement lists of who's endorsing who almost nauseating. Nobody's doing this because they actually believe in the guy. It's because maybe he's going to get me a better critic role and then a cabinet position if he wins. And both Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole, like Justin Trudeau did not win in 2019 or 21. And I mean that in the sense that Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole just failed to win.
Exactly. It was theirs to win, or theirs to lose, really. And they managed to do just that.
Clear paths to victory. They could have just focused on the things that people cared about while not seeming like weak or flip-flopping, because that was even people don't remember it as much with Andrew Scheer, because Aaron O'Toole was the arch flip-flopper in terms of the carbon tax, gun control, conscience rights, all of this other stuff. It was ridiculous. But even Andrew Scheer, that was the problem. Andrew Scheer's pro-life, and that's good. I'm pro-life. When you do the thing where the media asks you, are you pro-life? Are you whatever, like they accuse you of being something bad, and you won't answer the question, you are playing into their narrative that this guy has something to hide. And voters are very strange. Canadian voters don't pay attention that much to politics. The funny thing is we have higher voter turnout, well, way higher, usually about 10 or 15 points higher than the United States.
Hmm.
Yet I would find the average voter in Canada knows far less about what's going on in an election than an American voter does. Because I feel like there's more of like, it's very much almost a very cultural aspect of the UK. We have a kind of a British duty to the crown to vote, whereas the Americans are like, leave me alone. I'm allowed to not vote.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but you get a lot of people who with Scheer, as soon as they see him not answering a question, it literally means nothing. A
yeah,
voter properly informed should just say, okay, I don't know why he's not answering that, and it shouldn't affect their vote. But people are like, oh, he's not answering it, must have something nefarious going on. It's like, okay, and then this is why Scheer's team, his comms team, was so dumb, is that
yeah.
they wanted to avoid it. But avoiding issues makes you look like a coward. Even if people disagree with you, they will respect you way more if you
By
actually come out.
standing by what you say. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
When I go door knocking, if someone asks me what I think about life issues or abortion, I just say I'm 100% pro life, even if it's so screamingly obvious that the person
Is
is
not.
more liberal on that issue. And they usually actually, they're like, oh, well, fair enough. Because if I'm straight up about it, they're like, they're not going to fight back with me
Yeah,
because, well, that's his position. If I seem nervous and flip floppy, they feel like they have like now a weird responsibility to
yeah.
like, to like castigate me for not taking a side.
Sure, sure. And then I guess, well, which is all this has led to Pierre Polyev. So I guess again, that's with all the bad comes, yeah, here we are now. And yeah, he's campaigning across the country. He's taking off his glasses, but he's saying all the right things, and yeah, the momentum is there. I mean, you're constantly posting the polls of the federal support, and Pierre could do nothing again and would win, but he's not just doing nothing. He's going out saying the right things, and he's just kind of taking down journalists who, like you said, like to kind of throw the questions at him and these little gotchas. And I mean, the Applegate one is the greatest. Just calmly, coolly questioning. Hey, you're accusing me of this. Where and so a conservative majority is looking pretty optimistic and yeah, it would be great for all of Canada, and I hope that he has very little to do in order to still be successful, but I still hope that he's going to be the guy that the one that's going around talking, saying the things he is, because Canada needs it.
I would say that what is there to lose by being the great reformer at this point as well?
Yeah, yeah,
I know you can win the election, and this I'm not saying that he might go away from this. I'm just saying in terms of a general sense of anyone who's the political leader at the time like this, where everyone just wants the
yeah,
opposite of what's currently in government. Just be the reformer. It's like
yeah,
make in the most egotistical way possible. Be the change maker who comes in and actually doesn't just do a better job than the previous guy. Like make sure you transform how Canadian government works, how people view the country. Because
yeah,
I'm not using the word, I'm using the word in like it's in the like its dictionary definition, but you kind of need to propagandize in favor of small government and freedom and family again.
mhm,
Actually, that's the one thing, and I'm incapable of lying, so I'll just say what I usually think
yeah,
about what the Conservative Party does. Like I don't even like the "Bring It Home" slogan. Like I would have gone with something like "Building Families, Building Canada" or whatever, because I
mhm,
think we should be focusing on the idea of life without the state, not
yeah,
in libertarian sense of like let's have as little government as possible, but just the idea that government is there, but you don't need to interact with it.
yeah,
That we believe in you as a successful individual on your own, and that we know that your first duty is always to your family when it comes to where you live. And
yeah.
that's kind of the whole idea of Canada in a certain sense, is that
Well,
what makes
oh, well, I like that a lot because also like as a Christian myself, the family unit is the fundamental structure. And I think you can find the formula of to the degree that our current government has destroyed the family and then the size of the government as a result. Because yeah, the smaller the family, the bigger the government. I mean, I'm in Vancouver and it's a mess out here. And
I was going to say
obviously
condolences.
yeah, and obviously, like Christianity's not the popular religion out here, but as a result, people truly believe in the government, like that it's role to come in and save and look after you, and everything's paid for. Um, And so we're gonna need a big wake up. I mean, you're from Alberta, obviously it's the conservative province, as Canadians know it, the Texas of Canada, or whatever you want to say. But even
Here's
you
the thing I
guys
would.
had a little bit of a socialism scare. I mean, immigration's coming in, the big cities take the ridings and swing things. So yeah, whatever you'd like to add to that.
I just want to say that with the Texas comparison, the thing I always say now is Alberta is Texas if it was played by Wyoming being directed by Idaho.
So there's still yeah.
Yeah, but the thing with Alberta is that, or at least Calgary, and this is why our election was close in 23. This was actually an election in reverse, where I don't think Daniel Smith won. It was just that Rachel Notley failed to win because, frankly, the UCP ran a terrible campaign out here. It was very uninspired, was very light on new ideas, and yeah, so I can get into that a little bit later. But the thing with Calgary, and I always hear about it, and it's very true, is that in a lot of areas of Calgary, it's a capitalist city. It is not a conservative city. And it's starting to change now, which is really inspiring. But previously, you have a lot of people who came here for the oil and gas boom, and good on them. Came out here, helped build the province, but their motives for moving out here were so financial based, and
Yeah.
so many people were new. It wasn't like there was kind of a family culture out here. There really wasn't, and so people didn't really want to hear about social values. Social conservatism was like a bad word because it puts or it's not even true, but in their minds, voters' minds, it puts your tax cuts at risk. It puts the financial security of the province at risk because if you bring up social conservatism, you're going to lose the next election. And it's a really overwrought narrative. It's not true. If anything, I find that social conservative policies are what's uniting way more voters today than even tax cuts and spending cuts. Because spending cuts to a sort of middle class individual are still seen as negative because it's a cut. It's not more. I mean, people like positive things and not negative things, and a cut is inherently negative. It's a good thing at times, just as surgery is good at times, even if you have to like lose some or like some vital organs or something like that. Very strange analogy I'm going on here, but with all the social value, saying I want to pass a federal parental bill of rights, that's been extremely popular in my area when I go door to door talking to Conservative Party members and non-members.
It's most of the policies are just fundamentally a common sense approach. It just the power of social media and the mainstream media just makes it seem like the counter narrative is much bigger than it is. I mean, yeah, Daniel Smith recently passed the legislation in terms of minors not allowing them to take hormones and
It's not passed yet, but it is proposed because I think it's
just
being
proposed.
chopped up. I think it's being chopped up into different policies to each be individually passed. But yeah, that's what they're going to be doing. And they've already kind of set the tone where I think the school systems are already trying to, clean themselves up a little bit to kind of brace for impact so they don't get exposed for being nutcases.
I mean, that's been another thing that's been just exposed as well of what's going on. And on my first episode, I talked with a teacher from Abbotsford, Jim McMurtry, and he was let go for just questioning the First
Koji?
Nations narrative about that essentially a bunch of Christian churches at these schools just murdered children, and that's just what went down. And he was fired for just questioning that. I mean, and now a few years later, all the truth's coming out. It's like, wait a minute, there's been either no excavations or the ones that have been happened. There's been no evidence of this mass or massacre, but the schools, it seems like it just happened so quickly. I mean, I'm a product of the public school public education system, but I've just recently had a little girl, and there's no way I'm at this rate. There's no way I would send her to school. It's absolutely out of control. But the public education system just kind of teaches the next generation. I think that's why we are where we are. People don't know that they don't know. They're kind of brainwashed with this leftist wokeness, big government, socialistic kind of
Well,
mentality.
most people, I think there are definitely some. When I was door knocking yesterday, there definitely was a lady who had a Protect Trans Kids shirt on and was like, riding around with her family, and they had like the little mini library out in front of their house with like a bunch of socialist left wing books and stuff like that. You get people like that, no doubt. I think it's more so people have an anxiety about being noticed. And that's the
Mhm.
funny thing. We have so much social media saturation in society, but nobody on a personal level wants to be noticed. People
Yeah,
want to kind
yeah,
of still blend into the background. They like being noticed online, but
yeah.
if someone says, "Hey, what do you think about this issue?" It's like, "Woo!" They get like really tight because they don't want to take a position. Because what happens if somebody says something? So we
Yeah.
have a very clout-based society where people like positive clout for doing things that are easy, that are uncontroversial, or
Mhm.
if it is controversial, it makes you look like some sort of a victim or a hero. But I think what dominates a lot of people is the anxiety to look like or like a maverick or some sort of rebel or some sort of troublemaker. So it's almost like you live in a social tyranny a little bit, where everyone is enforcing rules that nobody actually truly believes in.
Mhm.
I think what if you've ever heard of the metaphor of like you put a bunch of monkeys into like a little enclosure and they have like a bunch of food, but there's one banana on the one side, and if one of the monkeys touches it, they get zapped. And eventually, even after no monkeys have touched the banana, as you introduce new monkeys in and swap them out,
All
uh,
right.
they all start like beating the crap out of each other if they even approach the banana. And
Hmm.
it's been like maybe multiple cycles where there's no monkeys in that were there for the original
Yeah, yeah,
notice that they were get shot. They all know that you're not supposed to touch it.
yeah, yeah,
And so I think that that's what you have with a lot of people, and this is not just in Canada, it's all over the West,
yeah,
where
yeah,
you bring up a subject and that subject is coded a certain way. That subject is coded right wing, even though just notice it's basically you're just standing up for normality. The
yeah,
best example of this, I was actually about to make a video on it later tonight.
yeah.
Derek Fildebrandt, the owner of the Western Standard, he was at an airport, I believe it was Calgary, maybe Toronto, I don't know, and he
Mhm.
was filming the tampon dispensary units in it, and all of the left is mad at him for noticing. You're not supposed to be filling them in a men's washroom. You're not allowed to do that. Stop noticing. Stop noticing. And
Wow.
they're trying to code noticing tampons in men's bathroom as right wing. So if you mention it, you're like, well, that person might be a radical because they're noticing this obviously insane thing in front of
Yeah,
them that everyone else agrees is insane, but other people will get really tight if you bring it up because they feel like there's about the shock is about to happen.
yeah, yeah. No, it's some weird, yeah, hypnosis that's going on where, yeah, people know but don't want to say anything. Well, and also another thing I want to get into. So clearly, you're very informed of what's going on in politics. And is it the 8 years of Trudeau that got you more into politics, or growing up, has that always been something that you've been keeping an eye on and is an interest?
I'm a big history guy, so I end up watching like documentaries all day, reading books. The book I'm currently reading is electing Jesse Ventura. It's a
Oh
campaign
yeah, no,
memoir from 1998, where I think it was one of his campaign managers wrote this book up of how he ended up winning the election. So it's kind of interesting that way. But I watch like a lot of Ken Burns documentaries where I'll watch them over and over and over again.
mhm,
I'm really big into different war history, like different history from like the early Americas or Europe. And naturally, if you're really into history, you get into politics because
mhm,
politics ends up shaping so much of what happens in history. And
mhm,
I think as I was getting more into, like, I think I actually kind of started off with a lot of culture war type stuff, like way back in the day, like more than 10 years ago, when there was a lot of fights online about, feminism in video games and stuff like that,
yeah,
with like Gamergate. So I'd watch like Sargon of Akkad and some of the other people who would
all
kind of
right,
make fun of the ridiculous feminists at the time. And that was kind of almost like on the cutting edge back then, where nobody was ever, that was kind of like an early 2010s trend of people finally noticing how crazy these activists are and then making entire YouTube channels about pointing them out. And
right,
then from there, I actually started listening to Ben Shapiro on Seattle radio, uh, and because I saw him on like the Pierce Morgan interview about firearms, and then him having that fight with Katie Tur that some people might remember, where Katie Tur said he was going to put Ben Shapiro in the hospital, or he was going to go home in an ambulance or whatever. And
hmm,
so from there, I was like, well, what's up with this guy? And I really liked the way he talked about politics. It wasn't hot blooded, being emotional about things all the time. It was actually dissecting an issue,
yeah,
figuring out what's true, what's not true, and then effectively acting on a philosophy of reasonableness in
yeah,
order to like try and make things better or try and take a position. That's where I would say I'm always been a bit of an anti-populist, because either something's right or wrong. It's not just because it's a big thing trending right now that we have to do
yeah.
something about it or we have to take a certain position.
Yeah. No, we're definitely, yeah, inundated with a lot of yeah, stimuli of, yeah, what's going on there. Um Yeah, so you're yeah, and then yeah, so you're running for Calgary Signal Hill in particular. Is that like a predominantly conservative area, or is and like how's the
It is the
race?
most conservative suburban riding in the country, and
Oh,
so
really?
the Conservative Party, some of the insider types are starting to refer to the riding as Thunderdome, because there are around 14 people running in the riding, and
Okay.
so I'm one of many, but I think I'm within. Hopefully, maybe I fall on my face and I come last, but I think I'm within like the top 3 or 4
Right on,
people
man.
likely to win. I have around like 800 supporters at the moment,
Right on, right
and
on.
that's not that much for this riding. When I say that, I mean like there's like 2,500 people who have memberships at all times in this area, so it's actually hard to sign people up. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
signed up a few hundred who never had a membership before,
Oh,
but
good,
it's a
good, good.
riding where anyone who has a membership mostly has one. And so, but there are ridings in Ontario. I know about a riding where the Conservatives are guaranteed to win. Only 2 guys ran in the nomination. Only 400 people voted, and that
Well,
basically is going to decide who's going to be the new MP.
right, right, right. Well, I think it's again, I think politics, like you're saying when as well, like it wasn't as popular. Maybe Canadians aren't as aware, but I feel like with all the things that are going on in the world and now the independent media, there's a bigger outlook or platform to find out what's going on. And I think politics is becoming very popular. And I think the best thing to do is, yeah, not to just sit back and give it opinions, but to throw your hat into the race and get people noticing. And I'm sure you're running against other conservatives, but I'm sure there's also a range of conservative values there. Um,
I'd say there's about 3 conservatives in the race out of the 14.
oh wow, yeah.
You get a
Well, I
lot of
guess people
people, and
just want to use the label and then not actually represent what it means there.
oh, there's one guy who's like, or a lot of people where they won't touch issues like immigration. They won't touch any social issues. They're saying we need to build 1.3 million houses by 2030, which is hilarious. One of the candidates said we need to build 1.3 million more homes by 2030, and I'm like, okay. And he's like quoting it as if he's like quoting Pure Polyev and Pure Polyev's position. Like, no, no, no. Polyev was saying that based on the current immigration rates, that this is to keep up, we would need 3 million homes by
Sure.
2030. He never said that. And so, but he's running on a fictional position because he doesn't want to talk about immigration. So he just wants to talk about building homes because that's the lowest effort way of doing it. And
Yeah,
a lot of other people, like, I'm not even kidding, my current MP, I used to be part of his board. He'd call social conservatives at the conventions the crazies and email chains. He went around saying to people that he preferred Trudeau to Pure Polyev after Polyev became the leader. There's a lot of people who are only running conservative because they couldn't win as a liberal.
sure, sure. Kind of snake, yeah, wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, again, I'm in Vancouver, so it's a different reality to maybe what's going on in most of the country, maybe not Ontario, but it's hard to make sense of people that still support this liberal NDP coalition or just being in like there's like I said at the beginning of the video, there's not one metric in these 8 years that's like we are better off and here's the statistics like there like that doesn't exist. And to quote Thomas Paine, time makes more converts than reason. It seems like people are starting to wake up to what's really been happening, but I'm still surrounded by people that are fully still left wing, and it's mind-blowing. It's like the meme of the guy who sticks the stick in his bicycle and falls over and blames someone else. It's like you don't like the cost of living and inflation, but you continually support and vote for the people that are implementing it. Like yeah, it's
And
wild.
here's the thing for the liberal vote. The NDP vote's a little bit different because it tends to be people who are reacting to the fact the liberals have failed, and so some of them are going to go vote NDP because they believe that the way that we get ourselves out of this problem is by tripling down on whatever the liberals had
More
already done.
government. Yeah.
And then also, private sector, public sector, lower wage union workers vote NDP because the promises of higher minimum wages and whatnot. It kind of makes sense of why they would vote for them. If you don't look at the issues too deeply, because again, most voters don't read the platforms. They
No.
vote on vibes, and the NDP gives I'm trying to help the lower middle class vibe. Less these days. That's why they're mostly voting. That's why union workers and people who are making less money, not struggling, are voting conservative these days because they realize the NDP is effectively the same as the liberals.
No.
A little bit of it to make an American political reference. It's kind of like people realizing. kind of, I guess it doesn't quite work, but because he's not running. But you know how Joe Biden became president, and he's actually been governing a lot like Bernie Sanders, which I think has lowered a lot of Bernie Sanders stock over time. Because we're like, we've tried Biden's literally trying what you were suggesting, and it's not
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
But it actually does make sense why there's still like a quarter of people, 23, 24, 25% of people willing to vote liberal. Because think about all of the people who, throughout all of the economic issues, the recession that we're currently in, the housing crisis, they've had their benefits increase as government bureaucrats.
Hmm.
They've had their wages go up 6-7% in some years. Remember, the CRA workers won a 21% raise. I believe they settled with them, and actually they got something close to what they had asked for. It was like a 50% raise over
Oh,
5 years. It was nuts. Like, these people have actually benefited greatly. There is more government employees in Canada making over $100,000 than there's ever been before. And I
mhm.
mean that by rate, not by raw number. It's
Right. Right.
crazy how much money there is in the federal government these days. That's where the Liberals, whenever they say, "Oh, our economy actually grew by 0.5% in just January alone," well, look at the charts. Energy, manufacturing, a lot of other industries actually contracted in January. We're obviously in a recession, but government had increased enough that it offset all those things. Because I think the government spending and government employment had increased by like 2 or 3% in January alone, when they're in a
Holy
big
cow.
new like government employee hiring drive. And that's not how you can base an economy on. But there's a lot of people who have worked too many white collar government jobs where you don't really need to perform in order
Yeah.
to keep your job. And
Yeah.
they forget an economy has to be based on making things or pulling things out of the ground, whether it's food products, it's raw materials, or you're making things like cars or, planes, chemicals,
If only
pharmaceuticals.
we had an abundance of natural resources to use and to sell to.
That's racist.
Yeah, that's the yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean, yeah, well, so I mean, you've been documenting the rise in the polls, and I like that you also pay attention to BC, being from Alberta there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the unelected David Eby is at full steam losing support, and the Conservatives. I mean, I never would have believed, based on Vancouver, that the Conservatives would be anywhere close. Um, but it's looking close. I think October is the election, so there's still
Yeah, I
plenty of
believe you're right.
so there's
I
still
think you
plenty
had
of time to gain. And I'm yeah, but you're right. There's a lot of people that are receiving the benefits of the handouts, but it's
people
funny to
are
be able
saying,
to be bribed with your own taxpayer money and then say, "Oh, here's free money." It's like, but
and I
yeah,
don't think that's working anymore.
yeah,
Not for David Eby, not for Justin Trudeau, because when people have kind of been bait and switched a lot with new benefit programs, new entitlements, new handouts, and they're realizing that not only is it their own taxpayer money, but they're not even getting back a disproportionate benefit to what they're paying in, even if they're in the lower middle class where they should be getting maximum benefits. It's not how it works. But there are loads of experts who will tell you that actually the rebate's helping people, the carbon tax rebate, even though
if they say
yes,
it
if
enough
you
times,
work
like
the numbers enough, you can make anything look good.
yeah,
Every stupid program had about 15 or 16 experts consult on it. It's happened. Every terrible, stupid policy in every country always has its academic boosters. But remember the PBO even came out with a report saying 8 in 10 Canadians were not benefiting at all from the carbon tax, and then suddenly they find another guy in the PBO to rewrite the report to say
yeah,
6 in 10 are benefiting. So even them crunching the numbers really hard and factoring some stuff out and factoring other stuff in, they can still only get 6 out of 10 Canadians benefiting.
yeah,
And how many of those people are benefiting by a more than net $50?
yeah, no kidding, peanuts. It's wild. What else was I gonna say
I
about
was,
that?
I was going to say on David Eby, though, the man's on a crusade to lose the next election in British Columbia. The man could have just cruised to victory, but I think because of his arrogance of having not actually had to work to become the new
Yeah,
premier of the province, like, yeah, he won the leadership, but basically nobody opposed him.
yeah.
Uh, or did he even run, or was he just appointed? I don't
I
even
think
know.
I think it was just appointed by Horgan. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, or at least Horgan like waved a magic wand over him. So if there was a leadership, he just won immediately. The guy thinks he's untouchable because he hasn't had to work for anything, and
Mhm.
so he's just stepping on every single rake, acting like, well, I can pick fights with anyone I want. And he's
Yeah.
in a province. The carbon tax only 29% there's only 29% of BC residents who want to keep the carbon tax in British Columbia. That should be a terrifying number because it's not even like EB owns that 29%. The
Yeah.
Green Party is probably 100% in favor of the carbon tax. So maybe a third of his voters actually still like it. It's not a
Yeah.
lot.
Well, yeah, now BC is the only province left standing that wants to add on with this fourth tax. I mean, I remember when they all met up, all the
Quebec's
premiers.
fine with it because they get the federal rebate, but they get to pay the lower provincial carbon tax cost.
Yeah, they kind of run their own little thing. Yeah, it's like we're Canadian, but we're still gonna do things our way. And I think Alberta was wanting to sign the Sovereignty Act to be as well. Like, no, the federal governments are gonna keep in and stepping in on and kind of dismantling our economy here. We want to say in what they do. But yeah, Davey Eby wore his little "I love electric heat pump" shirts to this panel where everyone else was like, no, this is taxing Canadians isn't gonna get us out of this climate disaster that apparently exists.
Also, here's the thing with immigration as well. Why are we bringing in 1.1 million people to a country where people are going to have to raise their greenhouse gas footprint by 15 times what they would need at home? Because Canada, unlike most of the world, is extremely cold. So why would you bring people somewhere where they need to have the heater on all winter if they don't want to die? You think
Yeah.
you would leave people in warmer climates where it costs less to live there, and you have to burn less fuel and energy to actually survive.
It's a satire. I mean, yeah, it's a satire what goes on, especially with that side of the political thing. A lot of catchy slogans but I think people are waking up. I mean, if BC were to turn conservative, well, at least one of the things I hope they do initially is hire back all these nurses that were fired for not being vaccinated. I mean, to simultaneously have this healthcare crisis and then fire all these nurses and not hire, like, it's just another satirical event. It's like,
And like
um,
what they fire them for? It was they fired them over literally nothing because
yeah,
it wasn't like they needed to stop the transmission of COVID. It didn't. They
yeah,
effectively got fired for not like singing the company song loud enough. It,
yeah,
it, it was just a litmus test to see whether or not you were allowed to work with them.
yeah.
Like I was actually the one who got rid of our AHS, the Alberta Healthcare Service CEO. One of my big article series I did back in 21 and a little bit into 22 was I documented with a guy named David Dixon, who's like a cybersecurity researcher. He used to be
Mm-hmm.
a cop in the UK, and he was mostly the numbers guy, and then I would kind of repackage all the data into articles. We had like over 400,000 views of our like 7 article series. Not
Oh, yeah,
everyone got viewed that much. That was combined,
sure.
obviously, but
Still,
not
that's
everyone rereads each one. So it's a large spectrum of people who would have read it. But like we were showing that they were only using like 230 ICU beds at a time when they were funded up to 1,400 beds. And then all the excuses started coming out. Well, we don't have enough staff members. The hospitals are empty. How do you not have enough staff members? Oh, they're not ICU bed trained. You've had a year and a half to train them. What's going on?
yeah,
And it was just excuse after excuse. And we even got to the point where we started noticing they would adjust their numbers down of occupied beds. So we have
mm,
250 beds we're using, and 230 of them are occupied. We only have 20 beds left. We need lockdowns. We might have to start triaging people, and it's also your fault for leaving the house to buy a donut. Uh, but but then when you actually looked behind the scenes, like 2 weeks later, they would readjust that day's numbers down. There was only 180 people in ICU beds. It's like,
oh yeah,
what? That's actually super low. And somehow, no matter how many times we popped over 90% capacity, we never started triaging people because somehow they were able to pull out another 50 beds out of their back pocket and put them
yeah,
on site because it's almost like we had way more beds than
yeah,
anyone was letting on.
yeah, yeah,
And think about it, 250 beds were online at times. And in a normal year, we have 400 beds. So we never even ramped up to what we have in a normal year.
yeah,
We're using 250 beds across a province of like 3.2 million people, spread across the entire province. So that means in some cities there's like 10 beds. What is like,
yeah.
and the problem in Alberta is our healthcare crisis is even worse than your guys's. We spend, and it's not the Conservatives, it's not the NDP's fault. Based on the Fraser Institute's research,
Mm-hmm.
Alberta spends the most per capita on healthcare, and we also have the longest wait times. Like knee surgeries tend to be the thing that they evaluate all the systems on because it's like a moderately invasive surgery, and there's a lot of steps that need to be taken.
Sure, sure.
In Alberta, I think it's like 36 weeks now that you have to wait to get that procedure. And the amount of time you're waiting obviously can cause other problems, which
Yeah.
might mean that you have to go back in the line to get other things checked out. It's nuts. But in Alberta, we actually don't spend that much on healthcare because every other dollar goes to people in administration, in HR, in things that not only are useless, they create trouble for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, right now, the Minister of Health is actually doing something very good. Adrienne Lagrange, great MLA, and I don't say that about a lot of politicians these days. So I'm actually being very good at her job. She used to be the ed minister, and she was very good at getting more funding to home schools, charter schools, and
Oh,
diversifying
good.
the education system. And so, but now she's the health minister because she's the type of person who does not respect people trying to get in her way. She's the type of person, if a union protester tried to get behind her car and not let her back out of her driveway, she'd back out anyways. Uh,
Oh, good
so
for
he's
her.
like she's like a 4'10" lady, but she's like she'll kick the crap out of you.
Nice.
But
Yeah.
what she's doing, she's taking AHS, which oddly enough, my MP Ron Liepert, when he was the health minister back in the day in Alberta, he was the one who created it. It's a big, bloated, awful organization. She's going to regionalize it. And what it's going to be able to do is be able to give her an excuse to get rid of tons of these just bloated administrative jobs that do nothing. There are like hundreds of people in AHS who get manager salaries. They are managers, and in their departments there are 0 people who work underneath them. So they're being paid $150,000 a year or more, and there's not a single person they actually manage. They just create more forms, more trouble, more steps, more bureaucracy for other people to work in. And the unions, though, are opposing Adrienne Lagrange to, like, tooth and nail, stopping her from re-regionalizing and saying this won't help nurses and doctors. This is terrible. And they won't actually say why this is actually bad. They're just saying unnecessary. Stop doing it. And it's
Yeah.
because the unions, especially the nursing union, loves the administrative HR jobs because they can take loyal union members and they can kind of push them upwards to these more prominent, higher paid positions where there's less work and you don't actually have to work in a real hospital. And so that's the big kind of scam in the Alberta Health Services right now, is that unions end up using these fake jobs, giving their highly connected people fake jobs that pay more, and then it leaves our actual hospitals without enough staff to manage all the beds we have, and so everything slows down to a crawl. Same thing in the education system. One of our worst MLAs, NDP MLA, Janice Irwin. She was a teacher for maybe 5 seconds, and then somehow she became like one of 7 vice principals at her school. Because what I've heard, and these teachers will tell me this, people who actually want to teach and do not want to be moved out to some administrative job because they actually got into the business to teach kids.
Yeah.
They say that 20 years ago, one principal in a school, one vice principal, a superintendent for kind of like a general area of schools, and a few other jobs, some janitors, a counselor or whatnot.
Sure.
What you actually need these days, there's like 5 vice principals, there's 2 superintendents for the area, and all of them are a lot of them are union hacks who end up like in these positions, even though some of them can't technically be part of the union anymore. The whole point is that they keep helping do the union's favor in these higher positions that they end up obtaining.
And just milking the system, and it
And you wonder why
correlates.
people vote NDP is because they're getting
Well,
taxpayer paid money, or like taxpayer paid salaries, and they go up by 7% every single year. They don't do that much work, and they get to feel smug and superior all while doing it.
yeah. No, exactly. And all the while too, it's not like even like our level of education is growing in comparison to the growth of all this administration. And it goes back to your fundamental argument and probably platform of a smaller government will be the most desired thing for all Canadians, whether they realize it or not. The less money we're paying in taxes, the more we're going to have, and the more likely we're going to spend it locally and distribute it that way. When we're already having it taken from us and we're left with pennies, the less we're going to spend and help.
And the ironic thing is they would take in more revenue if they lowered taxes.
Well,
And they deregulated, because who wants to work in Canada? There's people going south of the border. People hire very shrewd accountants because they want to pay as little tax in Canada.
Yeah.
If we had a 13% flat tax on the federal level, the government would bring in way more money than they do today, with sometimes their top marginal tax bracket being like 35% or like 27%, but that's also, you have to take into account the provincial taxes on top of that. It's crazy how much tax people pay, and nobody wants to work in Canada. Why would
Yeah,
you work there? Go to Montana, go to Florida, go to Delaware.
yeah,
What's the advantage of being in Canada other than the resources? And we have amazing resources, and it's
yeah,
a testament to it that people stick around just because the resource markets are like just that good. But
yeah.
even then, you're going to have to jump through 1,700 hoops in order to get a mine together, and the government might just kill it at the last second anyways, like the tech mine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're right. Yeah, people are fleeing Canada, and a lot of people are leaving BC too for Alberta. Hopefully, they're not bringing their left wing ideology with them there.
I
But
think they get it.
I mean, yeah, land, so much, second largest country in the world, so many resources, prosperous Canada, a prosperous Alberta, prosperous oil and LNG economy is prosperous for all Canadians. And yet, no, it's can't do any of that. Climate change, blah, blah, blah. I'm worried that there's going to be another year of arsonery, with forest fires and all this summer, because BC in particular like to use that as a pushing the climate change agenda. Um,
Well,
yeah,
I was gonna say I had to look up her name, but how disgusting was that a couple months ago? That MP Leah Gazin saying that she wouldn't condemn people for burning down churches because she didn't know who did it, as if
yeah,
she needed to know like who, like frankly, she wants to know probably ethnic background to decide whether or not she wants to actually condemn them or not, because she has an anti-Semitic streak of her own and tends
yeah,
to like to judge people on what they are rather than who they are.
yeah. Well, so I'm hoping for Canada. I mean, there's always going to be a shift in the pendulum in, I guess, any society. And we had the Harper, and now we've had Trudeau, and hopefully we're way farther that way. Um, and I guess time will tell, because yeah, I mean, you've elected Danielle Smith, and is she purporting to be who she kind of comes across as, a very good conservative, or is there still a
Here's the funny thing. She's actually fundamentally not very conservative as a person. It was 6 months ago, 7 months ago, she said she did not want to get into the parental rights debate. It's too political. I don't want to touch it. She's very socially liberal behind the scenes. The thing is that it actually was a testament to good grassroots organizing and this sort of culture shift in Alberta that forced her to then come out and say, yeah, no, we're going to pursue these common sense measures. And I don't take anything away from her for doing the right thing.
yeah,
If you did the right thing, you're the man in the arena. You deserve all the credit. So
yeah,
that's great. But the whole point is, I think that that's demonstrated that it's not really our politicians that have shifted in Alberta. It's the environment that's shifted, and they have to act differently, because there's still a lot of MLAs in the UCP caucus who probably shouldn't be there. Like, they should have gone away when the PC party went away a
yeah.
while back. And I was one of the 5% of people who didn't want the PCs and the Wild Rose to merge, because I was like, the Wild Rose are going to win anyways. Don't staple yourself to a burning log like the PCs and let all the corrupt people back in. But some of them are around, but some of those people actually have to act like real conservative these days if they want to stick around. Actually, that's the thing in BC. I got to tell you guys, if you're a part of the British Columbia Conservatives, do not combine with United. There is nothing to gain. It is a dead, rotting vehicle. Adding it to yourself is only going to slow you down. It would be a very unequally yoked relationship between the two parties, and they would force through as many of their current MLAs incumbents into the party, and you would end up with a party made up of 75% MPs from the previous regime who don't actually want to make good change. And that's actually what I say about the federal level. Sorry for going off topic, but on the federal level, yes, Poilievre's going to win. I think that unless he just chooses to lose, he's going to win. The biggest threat to the Conservative Party right now on a federal level is way too many red Tories who shouldn't be there in the first place, running in nominations that they have no business even being in the first place, and that if they get too many of those types in, who they would have run as Liberals if it was easier for them. We avoided one of these guys in Richmond Hill, Keva Charouz, who literally ran as the Liberal in a nomination in Richmond Hill in 2015, and he was trying to run as a Conservative this year. That if you get too many of those people getting through, he ended up dropping out because he didn't have enough time to file his paperwork. Too many of those people get through. They're the type of people pumping the brakes on any reforms that we want to make, because they don't fundamentally believe in them. And when the media pressure, the activist pressure comes on them, they're not going to hold strong because they don't care about any of this stuff. They just like being in office. Like a couple of my people I'm running against, they don't live in the riding. They just happen to lose their re-elections as UCP MLAs. And now they're coming out here. One of the guys, he's the guy who thinks we need to build 1.3 million houses. He literally voted against conscience rights for doctors in 2019. This is before COVID. He even said, "I believe in conscience rights, but not when they violate other people's rights to access healthcare." That's not, you don't believe in conscience rights if you believe other people's feelings get to override those conscience rights.
Yeah.
What ridiculous, but
I wonder, do you think people that aren't from a riding should be allowed to run in that riding then? I know there's a
here
strategic element to that, and that's
and
part
here's
of
I actually
politics.
I'm fine with them being able to run because if you're a like here's the thing, if you carpet bag, you could carpet bag from you know Newfoundland all the way to Yukon. If you're a great candidate, great. I hope you win.
Mhm.
You're going to actually do good things because at the end of the day, there's right and there's wrong, and
Yeah.
there's the right candidate and there's the wrong candidate. And if you're carpet bagging and you're just some guy who's wants an office job in government, who likes being in government, he didn't do anything in his previous time in office, or if he's never been in office, you can just tell he's not particularly conservative. Don't run. At the end of the day, I just want better people in government. I'm
Mhm.
not too worried about where they're from, but it's more of an insult that there's great candidates running in this riding right now. Like, I'll even give a plug to another guy I'm running against, but if he beat me, I wouldn't cry too much about it. Michael Kim. He actually lives in the riding. He's an orthodox conservative across the board on all the issues. It's a super, super blue riding. This
Mhm.
riding back in the day would sometimes go 75% conservative, which is unheard of
Oh,
for
yeah.
like an urban riding, like a suburban urban riding. And like so that's great, but when you're like when you're coming in here, I don't even care if you just have to cross the street to get into the riding. If you're a bad candidate, stay home.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, true. No, and then and to go back to your point about the BC United, the name change, the leader, yeah, Falcon, also during the pandemic was pro vaccine mandates for all the nurses as well. So a good thing about having social media is nothing ever gets deleted. And yeah, to me, it's obvious the guy's a big phony, but he is also spending the most in advertising. I think I see his advertisements placed over YouTube and the TV and whatnot. And I don't know if it was you that put out an article about his donations and spending. He's actually running at a net loss of his money. So which goes to show that he's not fiscally responsible. But then also, I'm laughing because I think all that money's been spent in all this advertisement trying to
Yeah.
buy.
I didn't write that article, but yeah, that sounds like a party that's like dying in the
Yeah,
sense that you're just trying to you're just trying to like inject as much fuel and nitro into this
yeah,
party as possible. See if you can feel like we're on the upswing and we can gain donations. I bet he assumed that they were going to be able to make more money back after this
yeah,
advertising run by going back to donors and saying, "See, look, we're on an upswing." They're not, and it's going to dry up, and if anything, they're going to end up like the NDP because secret is the NDP federally have taken multiple loans out on buildings that they own,
Mhm.
headquarter buildings, because they're that broke. Maybe not these
Surprise,
days. That
surprise! Socialism has got an issue with funding there,
Yeah,
eh?
who knew that socialists and trade unionists weren't actually good with money? But
Well,
with
Jagmeet's got an expensive suit collection that he needs to maintain, right? And his Rolex watches. So,
Oh yeah, and I don't go after people's like spouses in politics. Like I don't go out of my way, but like Jagmeet's wife does post the stuff on TikTok publicly. She's like like videos of her showing off all of her wealth, and she has like putting on $20,000 worth of jewelry in one video. And it's like at some point, it doesn't matter if you're a socialist or not. Like that's just kind of like gaudiness that I don't think that's in line
yeah.
with Canadian culture. And I actually would say that Canadian culture is fundamentally middle class family culture.
Mhm.
Even more so than the United States. I find that Canada's a very spread out country, was always meant to be that in our country, your family is more important than the community.
Mhm.
It's not a country where you kind of we're not very showy people
Mhm.
overall. I always found that Canada is very much not LA, New York culture. Even in Toronto, I think that was the whole point of Toronto. It's changing, and I think that's the problem. Is it's very
Mhm.
much this kind of TikTok hype man kind of thing that's invading. And I think that Jagmeet Singh and his wife are addicted to that sort of thing. So even if it's not even politically smart to be posting that sort of thing, they very much want to show off to their community that they have wealth because that's something that sometimes plays in those types of communities. But
Yeah.
so
A lack of awareness, and yet probably I'm sure their supporters are still fine with it without realizing the cognitive dissonance of all that.
Oh, and one other thing quickly on Kevin Falcons and spending, though, and this is the thing with money in politics, is that money really doesn't mean anything in politics anywhere. Michael Bloomberg spent over like $1 billion
Mhm.
or close to $1 billion trying to become the presidential candidate for the Democrats in 2020. And yeah, he got in the race late. But despite spending the most on Super Tuesday beforehand, it's dumping money for like over 30 days beforehand. Like it won him like 26 electoral delegates
Mhm.
for the convention. He won American Samoa, so I guess he gets that going for him. But money doesn't mean anything. Money just allows you to reach the people who would already like you. And so
Mhm.
the United doesn't matter how much money they dump. There's a fundamental one that changing their name from the Liberals was a terrible decision. I think the Liberal brand is terrible. But what's even more terrible is the fact that everyone knows you're the Liberals, already
Yeah.
doesn't like you, and now you're even obscuring yourselves to the people that might have still voted for you, and then changed your party color to like turquoise, which
Yeah.
just makes you so they occupy they're the party meant for nobody. That's why in the polls they have an equal number of people saying federally they're voting liberal and federally they're voting conservative. Those people will eventually go to the BCC once they realize that United is not the real opposition party anymore.
Right, right, right. Do you have hope for Canada, short term, long term? Do you see us? I mean, like you said, obviously Pierre is gonna win a majority, hopefully, but he's gonna have a lot of people with blue shirts on top of their red shirts, kind of thing. Do you? I mean, it's gonna be, if anything, incrementally change. Hopefully, going back to where Canada was. But do you? Yeah, I mean, do you have? I mean, we've printed off so much money, our debt, resources. Yeah, what's your forecast on?
I think everything can get better. It's never guaranteed, and that's where people should not do what they've done in the past, where conservatives win somewhere and they all kind of go home.
Yeah,
It's politics is not a long cavalry charge that you win on election night and then for 4 years you're just dominating. You can win the biggest majority government you've ever had, and if you're not there telling your MP pass this, do that, MPs like sitting there and not having anything happening because nothing happening and just increasing spending and sort of trying to appeal to some of the typical interest groups. That's very appealing because it's easy. There's a formula, there's a playbook to doing that. And what I think Canadians have to do is that if a conservative government wins and it's a big majority, they have to press hard for the conservatives to throw out the playbook. You guys need to not just bring us back to how things were 7 years ago. 20 like that's what very much what Aaron O'Toole represented. Let's bring Canada back to what it was like in 2016, 2017, as if it was good back then. It was just wasn't as bad.
yeah,
That the conservatives need to make a new status quo and then enforce it, because a lot of conservatives over time basically live to just enforce old liberal status quos and balance their budgets for them when they're taking like 4 to 8 years off on vacation, and then they come back and they keep screwing everything up. And conservatives don't tend to like. The perfect example of this is Andrew Coyne, somebody I consider just deeply pathetic in terms of his thoughts and beliefs. He is an institutionalist. He believes if a liberal government creates a new institution, so he considers like the carbon tax an institution, or the women and gender ministry like an institution. So if the conservatives ever got rid of those, he would accuse them of being traitors and leftists because they're not doing the conservative thing, which is maintaining institutions liberals create.
No, we're yeah. There's the government's gone so big. I mean, I look to Argentina with Javier Milei, and I think one of the first things he did was say, like, I think he got rid of half of the government institutions, if you will, and I think 2 months into his presidency, he posted a net positive in
They have a
in
surplus now. It's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So, and I
That's
guess
where I
where
hate
people are.
this.
Oh, sorry.
I,
Just quickly add to that was, I
okay.
guess people are afraid of how little work it takes to be positive. And so that's why all this attack goes on. And I think it's the same thing with Trump. It's like the government can make things easier, but the left seems to make it seem so complicated. And no, it's not. Sorry, yeah. continue.
Everyone wants to be the good news guy, and the good news guy is fundamentally handing out treats, gifts, and candy. Everyone wants to be the
Mm,
grandparent, not the real parent, because you can just,
mm,
give your kids a bunch of sugar and like make them like you for that way. Everyone wants to be that person in government. They don't want to be the person saying we actually need to tighten our belts, make cuts, and get back down to basics. Because there's an idea somehow like the arc of history is always more programs, more expenditures, where like does it have to be that way, or is there a
mm.
fundamental right way of doing government? I can't say like the objective best way of doing it, but I think we all know what the general ballpark is.
Yeah.
And through moral relativism, we all pretend like any system of government's just a different opinion, man. It's like, no, it's not. There's things that do work and things that don't work, and we've had more than enough history to be able to figure out what is actually effective and what isn't. People just like to pretend they don't because they have a pet ideology that they favor or whatever. But Javier Milei, I think one of his best moves early on, this is before they had posted the surplus, it was within weeks of Tim taking office. He just posted a photo of all of the presidential limousines and town cars and the different Lincolns that they owned just lined up and said, we're selling all of them. Because why? I like my executive branch, we all own our own cars. Why do we all need this fleet of black Mercedes and different vehicles that none of us really need? And they all have drivers, they all have their own
Mm,
mechanics, and this is costing like taxpayers. It was costing them like $56 million a year for all
mm.
these cars and all the workers, the drivers, and everything like that. Like the people who can't put gas in their car should be mad about that. Like that's disgusting that all these people have their own cars, but I need a government vehicle because I'm a very important person, don't you know? And that's the funny thing is that getting rid of those ministries, it didn't even a lot of those ministries didn't do anything in Argentina, like the women's industry ministry. That doesn't do anything. It's not like they help operate bridges or something like
Yeah.
that. And if you get rid of them, you're going to have to outsource.
Yeah.
It's nothing. If you get rid of it, it just poofs off into the air and nothing happens. It's like the carbon tax. The great thing about getting rid of the carbon tax, not only do people save money in the direct costs on fuel and heating, you get to fire 2,600 employees or however many
Mm,
who all they do is administer a tax that benefits nobody. And
yeah.
that's the real interest group on the federal level of government for keeping the carbon tax. It's the people who administer it. It's like Thomas Sowell when he worked at the labor ministry back in the 50s, and
Mm,
he said this in interviews. He devised a way of figuring out if the minimum wage law was actually benefiting more people than it was hurting. How many people are how much in like comparing the lost wages of people who are fired compared to the increased wages of people who get the new higher minimum wage, how many more people benefit? Like, is it a net loss of money that people have or a net gain? And he said everyone looked at him in the room, oh goodness, this fool has found a way of ruining us all, because the Ministry of Labor, or the Labor Department in the US, most of its money came from administering the minimum wage law. And that's the funny thing, is that all of these, like, people act like government doesn't cost money and they just do stuff and it happens. Like, no, it's billions of dollars doing something that we aren't even sure benefits a single
yeah.
person. Like,
Yeah.
that's so, you would never act like that in your own life. If
That's
you're
that's
doing
or sorry, continue, finish. Sorry.
I was gonna say, if you do anything like that in your real life, you're probably being scammed by someone who thinks if you pay them $500 for their course, you're going to be a millionaire, and you
Yeah.
never consider the cost of, like, you're like, well, if I don't pay for this, I might not be a millionaire. I'm like, stop it.
Yeah.
Stop paying for things that are not a guarantee. And the government does that all the time. Universal dental is a scam already.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Dentists are not signing up for it because the whole government scheme here is, let's pay dentists $20 every time they meet with a universal dental care client, and nobody's signing up for it because you never went to dental school to make minimum wage,
Yeah.
effectively minimum wage after all of your costs treating people.
Well, it's not like our healthcare is this beacon of success where it's like, let's apply that to now the dentistry like industry. But it's interesting you brought up Thomas Sowell there, because that's the same point that came to my mind just as you were explaining that. It's like, to the degree that these government jobs depend on people being impoverished, it's like they're not gonna. Yeah, the scam is up. He exposed them for the fact that their job depends on people being on welfare. And that, yeah, I mean, that would probably be one of the antidotes, is tackling public education and maybe slipping in some Thomas Sowell basic economic books to the curriculum.
Best Thomas Sowell book is Visions of the Anointed. If you've ever
I
read
don't
that
really
one,
have that one.
I believe it's pretty expensive, which is why I audiobooked it. So I would recommend that one to you and your audience. But like, and it almost describes like the psychosis of experts in government and bureaucrats, that every time they pass a new program and they're like thinking that this is going to solve a big crisis that they've kind of dreamed up and it wasn't a real crisis, they end up making the problem worse. And the rationalizations these people come up with, and we see this all the time in the federal liberal government. Oh, if a program fails, it just wasn't a big enough program, or the public didn't understand the program well enough, or somebody else screwed up, but definitely not them. And so he goes through all this with like different laws that were passed to try and increase employment. Like the Great Depression in the United States is a great example, that the New Deal actually made the recession go on 5-6 years longer than it should have. Yet every single time a program failed and it actually suppressed employment, or it basically overtaxed some people and then handed their money off to a government agency that was basically just digging ditches and then filling them back in. Every time this obviously was slowing down the economy, they would just dump a bunch of extra money in, because for a second the economy ticks up after you spend a bunch of money. And the Liberals, what they're doing for the polling is almost the same thing. Every time they announce a big slate of new programs, their polling ticks up for like a second, and then it goes back down when people realize it didn't do anything. And so before the next election, I could see the Liberals announcing more than $25-30 billion in new programs, simply because they like when the line goes up for a few seconds. But nobody is actually, once the writ's dropped, nobody's going to notice like, well, you have to vote Liberal. We have pharmacare. No, we don't. We have a promise of pharmacare. And even then, it's not a pharmaceutical company's, like, it's not my right to force them to pay, like, to make me, like, to give me drugs at a certain price. It's not the dentist's job to give me, like, to clean my teeth for $20.
No, I think he also lays out the fundamental argument between a private and public institution is public is going to have a never-ending supply of money. So it's not like there's no business model and we need to make a profit, therefore this institution will be successful or even runs. It's like, no, we have an endless supply of taxpayer money, so we can just continue to throw money at it, whether it works or not. Where in the private industry, you must provide a service or good that customers want, and you can make a profit on in order to sustain. And
but they find the whole concept of profit to be evil, as if doing it at a net at sort of like a net zero cost or whatever, doing it not for profit, it makes you any more altruistic when all these government employees are making way more than their counterparts in the public sector these days, and not one of them is accused of being greedy, despite that they also get bigger benefits on top of that.
Yeah. Well, one of my big awakenings was 2016. I mean, I was following Bernie Sanders, and it's like he didn't pay his own staff minimum, like the minimum wage, and women were actually making less than the men on his staff. And it's just like there's so much it's like do as I say, not as I do. It's like you're not even a model for what you're claiming to represent. And
it's because he fundamentally has a rational mind when stuff actually starts affecting him. It's not like he started giving his book royalties off to different, pro-labor like charities or whatever. He thought, and rightfully so, I wrote the book, I earned the money, it's mine. And because it is his money. And when he's running a campaign, it doesn't make sense to pay your volunteers $15 American in 2016 to do like leaflet dropping. It's not worth that much money, so you shouldn't pay someone that much. And think about, again, how many people in Canada are just having to get, because there's no such thing as a minimum wage. The minimum wage is $0. And the minimum wage is the greatest creator of people's $0 wages that's ever existed in government, because you are saying that either you have to make 15 or you get to make 0. Whereas a lot of people say, I take 13. I'm just doing this as a supplemental job. I'm 14 years old. Of course I can work for 13, but now you can't get a job at McDonald's doing some like cleaning tables unless you're being paid like enough for like a living wage. But the thing is, it stops being a living wage within 2 months when all the prices go up, and everyone else has $15 in their pocket too.
I mean, and I'm not even that old. I'm 34, and my first job was the first 500 hours. I don't know if it was just a BC thing, was like the employer could pay you only $6 an hour, and minimum wage was only $8 at that time. I remember doing this dishwashing job at $6 an hour, working like all night after school, waking up, working all night. It was horrendous. And now there's people like demanding like minimum wage at like 20. It's like, I won't do this job for this.
Dude,
and another big thing I want to throw in there is a perspective of what goes on outside in the world. Not that I'm well traveled, but I've been to a few other places where it's like like kids of families who own a business will work there under the age of 16, and they're not being demanding the parents pay them a certain wage. They're driving around on like mopeds, not at 18 or 19, where like there's so many restrictions in ages and rules that, like you said, have the reverse effect and make things a lot worse. And Thomas Sowell lays out all those arguments yeah, clear,
I
concise.
worked at a liquor store for over 5 years, making only $15.80 the entire time. Or I think I think it was a little bit different. No, yeah, I think I might have been paying. I might have been a little bit lower at the start, but I was barely making any more after the minimum wage went up. If anything, it actually suppressed my ability to get higher pay later on, because I think like the minimum wage used to be like $13.50, and then it went up to 15. But that meant that I couldn't be paid anymore because cashiers were having to be paid more. So I made $15.80 the entire time. I was basically paid 80 cents extra over minimum just so a supervisor wasn't being paid what a cashier was. And that was a crazy job to be working 5 years, never being paid a wage increase. I didn't even complain about it. That was a job where I had to open the store in the morning. You had to do paperwork. You had to like receive orders. You had to put away the order. You had to meet customers at the cat. It was like other than the fact that I didn't own the building, it was like a really intense job for what was like my first job that I worked a very long time. I even refused to go on CERB, even though I could have made more money on CERB because that felt pathetic.
Principle, but yeah.
Yeah, but like that was like, and I could never get a wage increase because there's so many employees, and this happens at a lot of companies. Is that a new employee for the first several months that they're working somewhere sometimes doesn't turn a single profit for a company. They're too new. They don't know what's going on. They don't know how to sell. They are, they're not efficient. I think they said UPS has to like train people for like 10 months. Packers or like 5 months before they're fast enough that they actually make the money, the company money. So the thing is, companies pay you whether you're actually making the money or not. And so I wasn't being paid very much because all the new people had to be paid like they had been working there for quite a while. And I had to be paid less because it wasn't worth it, because all these new people who might not actually be working here in 2 months and they might actually suppress sales are like, they're having to be paid 15.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, 12 years being in a public education system that's only pushing left-wing stuff like profit bad, 1% bad, land, homeowners bad, blah, blah, blah. You're not exposed to the other side of the argument, the common sense argument. And Thomas Sowell says it's basic economics that just dismantles every single layer of government involvement in the private industry.
And people say, well, they don't see profit as bad in school. They actually do. I remember when there's a lot of, even in elementary school, a lot of like kind of sharing is caring rhetoric. I mean, you're only altruistic if you share things. You can't bring something in the classroom without giving it something to everybody else. And it's like this kind of like soft socialist teaching where the idea is if you do something, you're actually a bad person if someone else doesn't get to be in on it too. So that's where participation trophies are like, I don't want to be this person being hyperbolic or anything, but like it's like a socialist plot or something like that. Not really, but that you can't be shocked that a lot of people think that they are owed some of Galen Weston's personal income simply because, while I work hard too. No, you don't. You don't. You do not work the same amount. You do not work hard like Galen Weston does. I don't work hard like Galen Weston does. I don't work 80 hours a week managing a massive grocery chain and I get fired if it doesn't become more profitable in the next year. It's a little bit different than just being the person bagging groceries who gets paid whether or not the company's making money or not.
Yeah. Well, it's too bad because the people just don't understand the arguments, but they're so confident in their stance and their ignorance to that. To no responsibility of themselves, I guess, if you're in a public education system or in the echo chamber. I mean, in Vancouver, again, very liberal. It's like you turn on the TV and mainstream media, Hollywood, like everywhere you look, it's saying the same thing. And if you're in it, you don't know. But I mean, 8 years later of Trudeau, I think people are starting to find all the holes in what's going on. And yeah.
Well, it just made life worse, just the philosophy. I think people just are really sick of his way of thinking about something. Just because you use happiness, sunshine, rainbows, and butterflies rhetoric doesn't mean you're not crushing people under your like regulatory boot. In politics, left-wing politics, and because fundamentally things that are not true do not work. That's why movies suck now. Just because you brought up like entertainment industry in Hollywood, it's like movies suck now. It's not because wokeism is like unappealing. It's not, but it's because fundamentally it's like not true. It's just when things are not true, it's not appealing to the mind, and that's what's happened in Canada in so many areas. Is that when you pursue untrue ideas, bad things happen.
Yeah. No, exactly. You force certain narratives where you're not relying on a profound story. You're relying on external factors like what's the cast like, what's the color of the cast, or who's the lead role. It's like, no, the story needs to be true and good. That resonates. I guess the archetype. I think Jordan Peterson also helped me understand a lot of the narratives, mythologies, and all that. And yeah, it's not something to turn your head at. I mean, there's certain truths that are true, and you can't argue. And if we try to warp the truth, it's going to only come back in a mess, and that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Well, I think on that point, that would be a good point to end this. But again, appreciate your time and conversation. I'm wishing you all the best with your run with the Calgary Signal Hill area. And is there anything you'd like to explain or talk or promote?
No, this is totally fine. People can, like, of course, look up my YouTube channel, The National Telegraph. Daniel Boardman and then Benjamin Dichter also sometimes make videos there, so you won't always see my face if you click on a video. But thanks for having me on. I'll definitely come back again whenever you have time.
Absolutely. All right, appreciate it, man. Enjoy the rest of your day.
The Flow and the Mo.